Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea Podcast here on my YouTube channel. I am, of course, your host, John Campea. It is a pleasure and an honor and a distinct privilege, may I say, to have you joining me today on the show. Today, we got a whole bunch of topics and questions we're going to be taking from you guys that you guys have sent in to me. How do you get a topic or question on the John Campea Podcast? It's simple. Just email me anytime at the John Campea Podcast at gmail.com. That's the John Campea Podcast at gmail.com. Just send on in your questions to me. Very important note, guys. When you send in an email, keep it to 90 words or less. I simply don't have time to either read them in the first place if they're much longer than that, but I certainly don't have time to fit them on the screen if they're any longer than that. So keep them to 90 words or less. We are doing this show live. Been trying a new system and doing a live. I know a lot of you guys have been asking me to do a live, so here we are. A special hello to all you guys who are here in the chat board already. Thanks a lot for being here, guys. Good to have you guys here. So what I'm going to do is I got 7 questions picked out right now. If you want a sneak peek at what those topics are, check in the description of this video and you'll see a little sneak peek as to what they are and the topics we're going to be covering. Then I'm going to save a few minutes at the end of the show to go over to that live chat board and take some of the questions and topics that you guys in the chat board are firing in. I don't fire them in now because I'll never be able to get to them right now. My chat boards are, if you look at me seeing over here, that's because that's where my chat board is. Don't put them in there just yet. Wait until we get to that point in the show and I'll let you know when to start sending them in. All right, guys. So I got to bring this up. Did anybody catch that? Now, I'm not the biggest boxing fan in the world. I certainly follow boxing a little bit. And after that last Manny Pacquiao fight in Australia, when the judges completely ripped him off, I said to myself, I'm never watching boxing again. This sport is so corrupt. And then I went to watch that Canelo Triple G fight. It was a good fight, but you have to be, you'd have to have Odin's missing eye to not know that Triple G won that fight. Clearly he won that fight. And they called it a draw for money. Even all the ESPN commentators are saying sport's corrupted, there's money, blah, 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 blah. I just don't know how anybody takes that sport seriously anymore. I'm not casting any shade on anybody who are boxing fans, but the way the corruption in that sport is just so outrageous. It's just nuts. Anyway, boxing talk. Okay, let's get on to the first question of the day. And the first question today comes to us from Robert Kessler. And Robert Kessler writes, "Hey John, big fan. With the divisive nature of Mother, in particular the F cinemascore, do you think this will negatively impact Jennifer Lawrence's career and make her less bankable?" Yeah, thanks a lot for the question, man. And yeah, Mother. I mean, everybody's still talking about Mother. Say what you will about Mother. Love it or hate it. You got to acknowledge everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about this damn movie, Mother. And if you saw my review, you know my thought on Mother was that it is a brilliant attempt from an artist of a filmmaker in the terms of Darren Aronofsky, trying to make an intricate, complex, layered metaphor on top of metaphor on top of metaphor on top of metaphor piece of art on the screen. And in many ways, he accomplishes that. Absolutely. The problem is Darren it's not that he failed. It's that I don't even think he tried to take the message of his art and the metaphors of his art and put them in the container of a enjoyable film. And when I say enjoyable, I don't mean funny, yuck, yuck. I mean, Schindler's List is tragic and heartbreaking, all that kind of, but it's enjoyable. There's an experience to watch there. There's nothing to follow in Mother. And there are certain film critics that liked it. The film critic scores continue to drop. Like at first it was like around 78%. Last I checked, it was at like 68%, 65%. It continues to drop. And the audience, and I anticipated this, the audience is just like, what the hell is this? The audience has not connected with the film whatsoever. And it bombed on its opening weekend, made $7.5 million on its opening weekend. So the question is, does this film bombing, and I wouldn't even say the movie's divisive. I think it's with an F cinema score. You don't call that divisive. That's the audience generally did not like this film. Does this hurt Jennifer? I was going to call her Jennifer Garner. I got Jennifer Garner on the brain. Jennifer Lawrence's bankability. Well, I mean, there's a couple of ways of looking at that. Number one, there is no such thing as bankability anymore. I mean, really, it's about talent. Gone are the days where if you put this actor in this movie, everybody will come see it. Those days are gone. That doesn't happen anymore. today we see the biggest movie stars in the world in a movie that flops. And, Jennifer Lawrence, love her or hate her, you have to acknowledge she is one of the biggest movie stars in the world. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. She is. And I'll go so far as to say, I think she's one of the most talented actresses in the world, too. Now, everybody knows I'm extremely critical of her when it comes to her performances in the X-Men movies. I feel like she just mailed it in every single time. But when she wants to, she is one of the most talented actresses in the world. And while I did not like Mother, I gotta say, the performance Jennifer Lawrence gives is insanely good. Like her and Javier Bardem, the only reason I didn't get up and walk out of the film, I think, is because her and Javier Bardem were like just delivering these powerful performances that I enjoyed watching them on screen, even if, what their characters were doing was completely nonsensical and there was no real narrative to the story and all that kind of crap. It was just a metaphor on top of a metaphor on top of a metaphor and a message that Darren Aronofsky was trying to get across. And I respect that. It just didn't quite work for me. I don't think doing this movie will hurt her any more than any big movie star being in a movie that bombs. It doesn't matter unless for whatever reason the audience feels that it's that actor's fault for the movie bombing. If the audience ever feels like they watch a movie and it bombs and they thought it bombed because that actor was terrible, maybe. But this is one of those situations where Jennifer Garner, I keep saying Jennifer Garner, I have Jennifer Garner on the brain. I always have Jennifer Garner on the brain. Jennifer Garner. This is one of those cases where Jennifer Lawrence, it was not her fault because all she could do is take the script and act it out, and she acted the hell out of that movie. I thought she did a terrific job. So anyway, yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. But I'd be curious to know, have you guys seen Mother yet? I mean, I know with the box office is 7.5 million. I know not a whole hell of a lot of you guys have seen Mother yet. But for those of you who have, what did you think about Mother? What did you think about Jennifer Lawrence's performance in it? Do you think the bombing of that particular movie is going to negatively affect her career? I don't think it will. I honestly don't. I don't think it will in any way at this point. All right, let's move on now to the next question and topic of the day. The next question and topic today comes to us from Johnny Miller. And Johnny Miller writes, "Hey, John, longtime fan. Since Zack Snyder is not steering the DCEU proverbial ship any longer, is it fair to assume that Joss Whedon will be taking over the reins a la Kevin Feige?" All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And yeah, so Zack Snyder, obviously no longer involved with the DCEU. And Joss Whedon's come in. I mean, obviously, horrible, terrible family tragedy for the Snyders. And under the worst of circumstances, Joss Whedon had to come in and kind of take that over. Now, we'll set aside the issue about, how much are they really changing this movie? And, is Joss Whedon, I mean, he came in, he's now directing Justice League, he's supposed to be doing Batgirl, all this kind of stuff. Is he kind of taking over the DCEU? And I've been hearing a lot of people, the reason I picked this question is because I've been getting a lot of similar questions. A lot of people asking, is Joss Whedon now the Kevin Feige of the DC cinematic universe? And in many ways, look, I think Warner Brothers, they've been doing a lot of things right lately. A lot of things right. I think the people over at Warner Brothers are incredibly smart. But I think the one thing they still need to do is truly appoint a Kevin Feige figure. And in some ways that's Jeff Johns, and Jeff Johns is a brilliant comic mind. I still don't think he's a brilliant movie mind. But that's just my opinion, and let's see how it all works out. He's been making some really good moves. But I don't think Joss Whedon is the guy. And to be quite honest, let's not forget, it's not like Joss Whedon was that guy over at Marvel either. Joss Whedon wasn't that guy at Marvel. He was just in charge of particular movies. Yes, they would bring him in to consult on some of the other MCU movies, but Kevin Feige was the Kevin Feige at Marvel. So it's not like Joss Whedon was the big guy over there, and now he's come over here, so he's the big guy here. And honestly, if his name wasn't Joss Whedon, I don't think we'd be having this discussion at all. I think you can just see from the surface, Joss Whedon is not taking over the DCEU. He's a guy who has stepped in to take over one movie. He's being scheduled to do another one, but that's not anywhere near close to taking over the DCEU. So no, I don't believe at this point, I don't believe at all that he's been stepping in to take over the DCEU. Now, that could change. Warner Brothers and studios as a whole, all studios are to one degree or another. Sony, Disney, Paramount, they all are are somewhat a little bit reactionary. They all are. Some studios are more reactionary than others, but all studios are reactionary to one degree or another. So let's put it this way. You and I can speculate about how much changing and how many changes Joss Whedon has been making to Justice League. We can debate and discuss it all we want. The bottom line is the executives at Warner Brothers know how much he's changing and how much this final version of Justice League is going to be Joss Whedon's product. They'll never tell us, but they know. If Justice League comes out, and if it is like 50% higher on the critic rating than Batman vs. Superman was, and if it hits the $1 billion mark and joins the $1 billion club, and if the audiences are not divided on, the audiences generally speaking are like, yeah, this movie was really good. If they do that, if Justice League does that, and Warner Brothers believes, again, let's put aside what our speculation is. Let's just say for a second, if Warner Brothers believes that whatever their final product of Justice League is has a lot more to do with Joss Whedon and what his changes were, if that's the case, and that's a huge if that we don't know the answer to, but let's speculate for a minute. So if the movie's a big hit, much higher critical score, audience responds better to it than they did Batman vs. Superman, it makes more money than Batman Superman, and Warner Brothers feels that Joss Whedon is more responsible for that, then this whole thing about is Joss Whedon taking over the DCEU conversation could change. That could change. As of right now, I say no, he's not. Not at all. Not in the least. I don't think he is remotely. But if a certain set of circumstances line up and the dominoes fall in a certain way, and Justice League ends up being a massive hit both with the box office, the audience, and the critics, and Warner Brothers thinks Joss Whedon is mostly responsible for that, or at least significantly responsible for that, then there could be some conversations over at Warner Brothers about, you know what? The audience obviously trusts this guy. The audience clearly trusts Joss Whedon, and we should trust him because we like what he did with this. And then that could become a different conversation. But my opinion is, as of right now, no. I think Joss Whedon is just a very talented filmmaker. And look, whether you love or Joss Whedon, there's no denying this fact. This is not in dispute, this is a fact. Joss Whedon is the man behind the two most successful comic book movies of all time. That's a fact. Now, we can debate what that means, but the fact of the matter is, Joss Whedon is the man behind the two most successful comic book movies of all time. And, believe that Warner Brothers takes that into consideration. Whether that'll mean anything, we don't know. We still got to see Justice League and see how that turns out. It could be amazing. It could suck. We're just going to have to wait and see. The clock is ticking. We're going to know pretty soon. But I want to know, what do you guys think? What do you think the status is of Joss Whedon with the DCEU right now? But more importantly, if those dominoes fall in a certain way and Justice League turns out to be great and the fans love it and the box office loves it and Warner Brothers thinks he's kind of responsible for it, do you think that changes the conversation, or do you think that just keeps things the way they are? I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. All right, let's move on now to the next topic. And the next topic today comes to us from Jay. And Jay writes, "Hey, John, can you explain why studios pre-schedule release dates? Why not complete the film and then schedule the release date?" All right, thanks a lot for the question, Jay. And again, this is one of those questions that I actually get a lot. A lot of people send me similar questions to this about why do they schedule the release date before they even started shooting the movie? Why not shoot the movie? Why not finish the movie and then schedule the release? It's a totally fair question, but there's also a very reasonable and rational explanation for it. And that is this: scheduling. You have to schedule and plan and get everything ready for when, there is not a 4-month-long planning process to releasing a major Hollywood film. It is like a year and a half long executed plan and strategy. I'll give you an example. I can tell you this isn't giving away any insiders' trades or secrets. So many of you guys know my wife is a senior person over at Hasbro, right? So when Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was coming, even before they started shooting that movie, the toy production and design, the whole machine of getting the toys ready, has to start more than a year in advance. So they're making Groot toys more than a year before that movie comes out. They're starting to get that all ready. So even just something as simple as the merchandising, the planning for the merchandising needs at least a year. Now, then you're talking about the marketing campaign. You want to strategize, set up, and execute your marketing campaign. That's not something you do in a few weeks or even just a few months. That is something you start planning like a year in advance. So if you started the idea or the notion of, let's not even plan when the release date of our movie is until the movie finishes shooting, well, then you're behind the eight ball. Because now your movie finishes shooting and you're at least a year away before you even can schedule the release date. Not to mention, if you want to look at something like this list right here, like the release schedule, this is for January, what you're seeing in the sidebar here, that's for January and February of 2018. Look how packed it is already. So you need to stake your claim and claim your ground about what release date you want pretty far in advance. Normally, Star Wars can do whatever they want. Star Wars can say, we're going to open tomorrow, and everybody will just get out of their way. But for 99.9999999% of all other movies, you got to get ahead of it, and you got to plan when your release thing is. Then your marketing machine can start up, your merchandising machine can start up, and that means you have to have your release date before you start shooting the film. You just do. Now, that's not a rule, not every time. Some movies plan their release dates when they're already into production, and on some occasions, the movie gets finished before they plan a release date. But for the majority of films, Hollywood wide release films that is, you've got to stake your flag in the release date you want. That means it's got to be a ways off. You've got to give your marketing teams time to come up with their marketing strategy, which is a year-long process. You got to give merchandising time to get everything for films like comic books, movies, sci-fi, fantasy, any kind of movie that will have marketing. They need at least a year to get everything up and running. So if you suddenly had waited until your movie was done production, great, our movie's done production. We're ready to go now. Let's release it. Well, we can't release it for at least a year and a half because there's no viable open release schedule dates that are open enough for us to even claim for at least another year and a half. And we wanted it to be a summer movie, and the next 2 summers are already booked. So now we got to go to the 3rd summer from now. So no, you have to plan. And besides, here's the biggest thing too. The shooting, the scheduling and whatever of a movie is down to a science. 99% of the time, studios know exactly when a movie starts shooting and exactly when it's going to be done because it costs money to go overtime. And studios give filmmakers budgets. There are exceptions. Absolutely, there are exceptions. But generally speaking, the rule is you've got a budget of $72 million for a 75-day shoot. If you go to 76 days, now you're over budget. You've now gone over budget. You go 90 days, you're over budget. And filmmakers cannot do that. Again, there are exceptions, but those exceptions are rare. So basically speaking, the studios know when the movie's going to be done shooting because it damn well better be done shooting or else it's money coming out of people's pockets. So they know when the movie's going to be done shooting. They stake their claim for a release date. They get the marketing team going and they get the merchandising team going. So that all necessitates having a release date scheduled and planned quite often before a movie even starts shooting. All right, guys, thanks a lot for the question. Let's move on now to the next question of the day. And I see you guys are having a lot of opinions in the live chat board about that too. All right, let's move on to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from one of my Patreon supporters. And I'll get to my Patreon stuff in just a second. But one of my Patreon supporters, Daniel Tickner, who writes, "Hey, John, was it a mistake to make a big deal about Rey's family? In A New Hope, we had some minor hints, but nothing suggesting a mystery. And then bam, Dad Vader." Well, thanks a lot for the question, man. And you know what? Honestly, I would make the argument that I think Star Wars Episode 4 actually set up a mystery more than Star Wars Episode 7 did. Like, hey, we meet Luke. And so, wait, why is his dad, what does this do with his uncle and aunt? And then they start mysteriously talking about his father. Somebody knew my father? I told you not to talk about it. You know, so there's all that. And then he's talking to Obi-Wan and there's no mention of Luke's mother. Like no mention of a mom, which is inherently intriguing. With The Force Awakens, I still contend The Force Awakens did not make a big mystery out of Rey's parentage. I think the fans did that. All we know is that why is Rey on this planet? Because she was left there by her family. Now, I believe there is a bit of a mystery as to, okay, why did her, like personally as an audience member, I found a lot more mystery in the question of why was she left there? More than, I wonder who her parents are. Like, I still believe her parents are going to be a nobody of consequence. Like maybe minor consequence, but I do not think Rey is not Luke's daughter. I don't believe at all. I mean, anything can happen. She might end up being Luke's daughter, but I don't believe right now. I'm going to be shocked if she ends up being Luke's daughter. I think there are too many signs in The Force Awakens that point to the fact that she's not Luke's daughter. I don't think she was Han and Leia's long lost daughter. I don't think any of that kind of stuff. So I don't think, and honestly, so I don't think the movie itself made the big mystery. I think fans made the big mystery out of it. I think we are the ones who made the big mystery out of the whole thing. And honestly, if you just look at what A New Hope did and what The Force Awakens did, I actually think The New Hope set up more of a mystery than the whole thing about Rey did. So, but I'm just curious, you guys I already see you guys still fire, the guys in the live chat board. For those of you who are watching pre-recorded, the dudes in the live chat board, the Rey theories are flying. The Rey theories are flying. Kylo Ren's sister? Anyway, so that's just my thought on that whole thing. Thanks a lot for the question, man. Let's move on now to the next one. And the next one, pertaining to one of my favorite filmmakers, Ron Howard. The next question comes to us from Patreon supporter Nathan Oswald, who writes, I completely agree with you, John, that Backdraft is Ron Howard's best film. With that being said, what are your top 3 favorite Ron Howard films? Not including Backdraft, that's significant. Mine are Ransom, Apollo 13, and Frost Nixon. Thanks a bunch. Well, thanks a lot for the question, and thanks for being a Patreon supporter, Nathan. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned on the show the other day because Ron Howard came up. I think he's simply one of the finest filmmakers of our generation. And one of the things I mentioned is that Backdraft, the one he did with Kurt Russell, is my favorite Ron Howard film. I love Backdraft. Damn, I love that movie. That movie is so freaking good. If you haven't watched Backdraft, treat yourself. Watch Backdraft. Get on Netflix or Amazon Prime or the Google Play Store or whatever. Find Backdraft and treat yourself. But he's made a ton of good movies. You mentioned Apollo 13. A lot of people love that one. Frost Nixon was, I believe Frost Nixon was nominated for Best Picture, all that kind of stuff. So besides Backdraft, in no particular order, here are 3 of my other favorite Ron Howard films. Again, Backdraft is my number 1, and these next 3 are in no particular order. And a couple of them I think are very underrated films. Underrated film number 1 is the one he did with Thor, Chris Hemsworth. Well, he did with Thor and Zemo. Thor and Zemo star in Rush. Rush is such a good movie. So good. And I was not all that excited about seeing Rush because honestly, the trailers, I didn't think were all that good. I didn't think the trailers looked all that amazing. And then I watched the film like, oh my God, this movie's awesome. And it's all about the characters and the drama. And it's based on a true life story. And true life story movies always kind of sucker me. And I'm a big sucker for true life stories and true life movies. And I thought that movie was just stupid good. Okay. The next one is another one of his that got nominated for Best Picture and I think might have won Best Picture. I'm not quite sure. I think it's, guys in the chat board, tell me if this one won Best Picture. But it's one of the films that he did with Russell Crowe, and that's A Beautiful Mind, which is just one of the other films that convinced me that Russell Crowe is simply one of the finest acting talents on the planet. I still kind of think that besides Daniel Day-Lewis, I'm not saying Russell Crowe has the best movies, but I think besides Daniel Day-Lewis, I think Russell Crowe is the single most talented actor in the world. That guy can do anything. He can play any kind of character. That doesn't mean all the movies he's in are good. That doesn't mean he's always given the best characters. But this dude can do anything. And A Beautiful Mind really showed that. And the movie is so good. And like I said, I'm not seeing anybody answering it yet because I think people are looking it up on IMDb. But I do believe Beautiful Mind won Best Picture, although I could be wrong about that. Okay, next up, the third one I want to mention is another crazy underrated film. And nobody went to go see it because the trailers, again, were bad. But it's another movie that Ron Howard did with Russell Crowe. And that's Cinderella Man. This is a special, special, special movie. The narrative is wonderful. Again, kind of based on the events of a true story. It's funny. All 3 of these, we're talking about Rush, A Beautiful Mind, and Cinderella Man are all movies based on true stories. But I'm telling you, Cinderella Man is a special movie. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Quite frankly, I thought Russell Crowe should have been nominated for Best Actor for this. He might have been. And I thought Cinderella Man absolutely should have been nominated for Best Picture. But it was around the time that Russell Crowe had all of his off-camera nonsense going on, when he was like throwing phone books at reporters and things like that and basically acting like a spoiled brat. And so I think people were this was around an era of time when people were getting really tired of Russell Crowe and his antics. And I get that. That's fine. But I think it unfortunately made people overlook what was a truly exceptional movie in Cinderella Man. So yeah, guys, homework. If you have not seen Rush, Cinderella Man, or A Beautiful Mind, I highly recommend that you guys give those films a shot. You will be very happy that you did. All right, let's move on to the next question now. You know what? Before I get into the next question, I'm going to mention this. The last couple of questions that I pulled out here were from Patreon supporters of mine. My Patreon supporters are the ones who make these videos possible. They are the ones who actually make me able to do this full time and make all the videos that I make every single month. We've got things like my Patreon supporters get priority selection when it comes to picking out the questions for the John Campea Podcast. We give audio-only versions of Star Wars Talk Tuesdays and the John Campea Podcast. We have an exclusive Facebook group where we're engaging. We've got a Patreon community where people can exchange with me all the time. There's a lot of benefits. Check out this URL, www.patreon.com/John Campea. Get all the information there and see if you'd like to become one of my Patreon supporters. If you do, awesome. And it's totally cool if you don't. I'm just happy you're here watching these videos with us. All right, now let's move on to the next question with the shameless plug out of the way. And the next question today comes to us from Desmond Falk. And Desmond writes, "Hey, John, loving your independence. I am loving my independence too. Thank you very much. My question pertains to the frequency today of opening credit scenes. What happened to them? It was the norm forever until a few years ago. The sequences seem to just shoehorn into the end of movies nowadays. What's that all about? This seems to be an art only rightfully maintained by the Bond movies today. They were an art in themselves. Do you have any thoughts?" Well, thanks a lot for the question, man. And yeah, a lot of people wouldn't know this now, but for the longest time, this is the best picture of an example of opening credits I could come up with. For the longest time, movies opened with opening credits. And that was just the norm. And then a couple of movies came out where there were no opening credits. It's like, wait a minute, the movie starts and we're just getting right into the movie? And I think a lot of people like that. There are opening credit sequences like the Superman movies, the original Christopher Reeve Superman movies. That bum, ba, 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 with the twisting, light-strained words and the tail of the light coming in and out. That will always be iconic. But here's the reality of it. I don't go to the movies to watch credits. I don't go to the movies. Now, you can have this discussion all you want about whether audience members should sit down and watch credits. That's another discussion for another time. And there may be some valid arguments in that. But I don't go to the movies to watch credits. I go to the movies to watch a movie. You want to put credits at the end of the movie? That's fine. Then you're giving me the choice. If I want to stay in my seat and watch the credits and read credits, I have the choice to do that. Don't force me at the beginning of a movie where I have no choice. I have to now sit here and watch opening credits. It's just a waste of time. I prefer for a movie to start and the movie to start. You know? Surprise! And I think most audiences are the same way. And I think when a couple of movies started breaking the habit of opening credit scenes and they realized, audiences really liked it when we didn't have opening credits, that became the new norm. And it should be the norm. Now, that doesn't mean there's not room for special things like Bond, because that is iconic for Bond to have their opening credits and things like that. And it doesn't mean other movies can't. If they have an idea for a franchise and they want to have this really cool thing that opens all their movies, that's totally cool too. But as a film fan, I'm personally really happy we don't have opening credits anymore. I'm happy with the lights coming up, the camera coming on, and the movie starting. And then if I want to sit down and read the credits, I can do it afterwards. And a lot of things like Marvel, DC, other things like that, Baby Driver, all this kind of stuff. A lot of movies now put a lot of effort in some very artistic end credits, which are great. But again, that gives me the choice as an audience member if I want to stay and watch them instead of force feeding them down my throat at the beginning of a movie, whether I want to watch them or not. So anyway, that's just my thought. You might have guys in the chat board. Talk amongst yourselves. Tell me if you guys like watching live or not live. If you guys like watching opening credit scenes of movies, do you miss them or are you just happy for a movie to start when the movie's supposed to start? All right, move on now to the last question of the day, and then I'm going to go over and start taking questions from the live chat board for a few minutes. And the last question today comes to us from Luis Garza, who writes, all this recent talk about movies brawling in the box office, i.e. Wonder Woman and Episode 9, I have been looking at what could potentially be a problem. And Incredibles 2 and Jurassic World 2 will open 1 week apart next June. Yep, that's right, in June of 2018. How badly can Incredibles 2 be hurt by this, or vice versa? Incredibles 2 is predicted by many to become the highest grossing animated film of all time. Could its chances be fractured due to this? Will one of these eventually move? Yeah, you're right. I mean, we've been so preoccupied with the December 2019 date where Star Wars Episode 9 is now technically scheduled to open 1 week after Wonder Woman 2. And now it seems to be a question of not if Wonder Woman will move, but where will Wonder Woman 2 move to? Because any movie would have to move. But who knows? Maybe Warner Brothers will dig in their heels. Who knows? I think Warner Brothers is as smart as that. I think Warner Bros. Will go, okay, let some other idiot film do that. We're going to be smart and do good business and we're going to move our date. But that there is another big showdown coming, box office wise, a lot sooner. Less than a year from now, June 2018, Incredibles 2 and Jurassic World: The Fallen Kingdom open 1 week apart. I believe Incredibles 2 opens first, and then Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom opens the week after that. And that is a showdown, man. That's a showdown. Now, here's the big difference, though, I think, between this scenario of Incredibles and Jurassic World and the Wonder Woman and Star Wars scenario. In the Wonder Woman and Star Wars scenario, I think those audiences are interchangeable, and that's bad news. Because I think most people, if you go into a packed movie theater of people watching Wonder Woman, and you say, is anybody here interested in watching Star Wars? I think every hand goes up, with a very, 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 very few exceptions. I think just about every hand in that theater goes up. I think people in a Star Wars theater are probably very likely to also be people, the demographic, that are also interested, very highly interested, not just remotely interested, but highly interested in seeing a big budget comic book movie in Wonder Woman. That creates a problem for both of those movies. With Incredibles 2, while there are a lot of us who are both really looking forward to the next Jurassic World and the Incredibles 2, there is some significant difference. I mean, the Incredibles 2 is primarily going to be geared not as a children's film, but as a family film. And those are some people mistakenly confuse the two and think they're the same thing, that family film and children's film are the same thing. They're not. They're not the same thing. Incredibles 2 is not a children's film. It's a family film. And it's going to be really targeting a lot of families that wouldn't necessarily take their kids and their family to go see a giant dinosaurs eating people movie, right? So I believe that the Incredibles and Jurassic World have a little bit of an advantage in that there's a little bit of parity between the core demographic of what's going to go see Incredibles 2 and the core demographic of what's going to go see Jurassic World. There's certainly a whole lot of overlap, but I think there is a bit of a difference. Look, if I was either in charge at, I think it's Universal that's behind Jurassic World. If I was in charge of Jurassic or of Universal, or if I was in charge of Pixar, I'd be getting on the phone with the other. So if I was the head guy at Pixar, I'd be getting on the phone with the head guy at Universal. If I was the head guy at Universal, I'd be getting on the phone with the head guy at Pixar and going and say, look, hey, we'll both probably do fine. We'll both probably do okay in our existing dates. But would it benefit us both if we negotiated one of us moving a little bit? I would at least be having those conversations. Again, I think Incredibles 2 being a family-targeted film will do fine. I think Jurassic World coming a week after the Incredibles 2 opens, I think it will do fine. Will they hurt each other a bit? Yes, I believe they will both be hurt by a bit. But any movie you open against is going to be hurt. You're going to be hurt by a little bit. The question is, which movie will get hurt more? I actually think Jurassic World would get hurt more a little bit. Because Incredibles 2 is already going to have its opening weekend all by itself. And it's going to make its huge opening weekend. but a lot of families are going to want to take them on the second weekend. That means people not going to see Jurassic World. Now, Jurassic World will still have a huge opening weekend, but it will get a chunk taken out of it. And Incredibles 2 will have a chunk taken out of their week 2 numbers. So I believe they will both be hurt, but not as tragically as Wonder Woman would be hurt trying to open against Star Wars Episode 9 on its next week. I think they'll both be okay. I think Incredibles and Jurassic World will both be okay. But again, if I was the head of those studios, I'd be having some conversations with my counterparts at the other studios. All right, guys. So with that out of the way, I'm going to go over to the live chat board. I know you guys have been firing in some questions here. I want to see what you guys are talking about and what you guys want. I got a fun guy saying, I'm 98 years old, and even I want to see Incredibles 2. How overdue is Incredibles 2? I mean, seriously, how overdue is this movie? This movie should have come out like 6 years ago. I am far more excited than a man my age should be about watching an animated film, but I am dying to see Incredibles 2. Let's see. Matthew Leach is writing, hey, John, what do you think of Jamie Lee Curtis announcing she'll return to the Halloween sequel / reboot for the last time and the date announced next year? I'll be honest with you, okay? Total honesty, because I will never bull my audience, ever. I will always tell you my honest opinion, even if my honest opinion gets me in hot water. I will always tell you the truth. And the truth is, I don't think the original Halloween holds up. I don't. And I know all my friends look at me like, like sacrilege when I do that, when I say that. And the Rob Zombie remakes of Halloween, I thought were abysmal. So I'm not a big Halloween fan. I am a big Jamie Lee Curtis fan. Jamie Lee Curtis is one of the big reasons that True Lies is one of my True Lies is my all-time favorite action film. Pure action film, I think True Lies, the one she did with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think that is my all-time favorite action film. So because Jamie Lee Curtis is talking about, that gets my interest a little bit, but I'll be honest, overall, I'm not all that interested in the Halloween franchise. Who knows? Maybe I'll watch it and it'll be awesome. I hope it is. But right now, I honestly don't think about it all that much. Warlock in the live chat board is asking, hey, John, I was wondering if you've been keeping up with Arrow recently. Did you ever come back after you left mid-season 3? Yeah, so I gave up watching it. I loved Arrow. Arrow was one of my favorite shows on television for a while. And then the writers of the show took that show completely off the rails and did some really stupid things. And I just gave up on the show. I eventually started watching it again, mostly because my wife, Anne, was doing an Arrow after show and she had to watch it. So if I want to hang out with my wife and she's watching Arrow, I got to watch Arrow. And then I had a whole bunch of people tell me, John, season 4 is great. What was the last one? Was the last one season 4 or season 5? I can't remember. But a lot of people telling me this last season was great. So fine. I got the CW app and I watched them. And honestly, I didn't think it was all that great. I thought they had a pretty interesting villain. It was cool seeing Manu Bennett come back as Deathstroke, but I still think they had the same problems as last time. I didn't think it was all that big of an improvement, but I am going to watch the next season of Arrow, and I am going to be doing review recap shows of Arrow and Flash and a whole bunch of other shows. But I'm just going to warn you right now. I'm going to be honest. And I know a lot of people watch after shows just to watch cheerleaders go, this show is the best. And those are the only shows that they'll watch. But I'm not going to be that. If an episode's good, I'm going to talk about how good it is. If it's bad, I'm going to talk about how crappy it is. So I'm going to do that. And hopefully it's good. Hopefully they've turned things around. Let's see here. It's always awkward me trying to jump around the thing and do the show live. Okay, Beat Morganthaler writes, hey, John, is Seth MacFarlane a failed actor and nobody dares to tell him? The Orville seems to confirm that notion. Well, see, failed actor? I don't know. A Million Ways to Die in the West didn't quite work. I thought it was funnier than what a lot of people thought, but it didn't work. And before we say the Orville confirms it, well, a lot of people watched the first episode of the Orville. Fox said that it was the biggest premiere for a television series they've had since Empire. We're talking about 4 years. And that's significant. Biggest premiere thing, I did not watch. I don't even know if there was an episode of Orville last night, so I don't know how the second episode did. I don't know. Look, I think Seth MacFarlane is a comedic genius. When he hosts Saturday Night Live, and I thought he did a great job. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I think he did a great job hosting the Oscars. I also thought, well, I think he did a very good job of hosting the Oscars. Billy Crystal is great. I thought Seth MacFarlane did a very good job of hosting the Oscars. When he's hosting Saturday Night Live, he's absolutely drop dead hilarious. He's got a brilliant comedic mind. But no, I agree. I don't think he should be putting himself in his TV shows or his movies, unless he's just doing voiceovers. I don't think he should be doing that. That is not his strength. So, but he's only had a couple of swings at bat so far. So I'm not willing to call him a failed actor yet. I'm not willing to do that yet. I want to give him one or two more chances and see what happens. Okay. Jeffrey Lane writes, "Hey, John, do you think they should use the John Williams Superman theme in Justice League when he returns? They said we will get the Superman we all love, and shouldn't that be the music?" I actually took a question like that on one of my shows about a month or two ago. Absolutely frickin' not. No, you do not use the John Williams Superman music. Look, I love the John Williams Superman score is the greatest superhero music score of all time. So, and I was just at the John Williams concert. I love John Williams. I love that Superman score. But that is to a different Superman. That's not this Superman's music. It's a totally different character. That's like saying, hey, John, if they do another Breaking Bad and Walter White comes back, should they use the John Williams Superman score for Walter White coming back? It makes about as much sense because even though they're both called Superman, these are two different characters from different film franchises and different identities. And Hans Zimmer created a magnificent new score for this Superman. Hans Zimmer's Superman score, bum, 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 bum. It's awesome. I love Hans Zimmer's Superman score. I'm not saying it's better than John Williams' Superman score, but the John Williams Superman score is to a different character in a different era from a different cinematic universe. And it does not belong here. It's the best thing ever. It's one of the best pieces of music ever made, but it does not belong. It simply does not belong. So no, I don't think they should do that at all. But that's just my opinion. You guys in the chat board, I'm sure you guys have some opinions on that and what you think. Anyway, guys, that will do it for me for this installment of the John Campea Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to be doing this show live for the next little while since I figured out a new way to do it and do it the way I wanted to do. Thank you guys so much for joining me live. Thanks you to all you guys sending in your questions. Once again, if you got a question you want to send it in to the John Campea Podcast at gmail.com. That's the John Campea Podcast at gmail.com. Make sure you keep those questions to 90 words or less. Keep checking back. I've got my review of Kingsman: The Golden Circle coming up at 2 p.m. Eastern today. I had a chance to go see Kingsman: The Golden Circle. What did I think about it? 2 p.m. Eastern. It's almost 10 o'clock. So in about 4 hours, a little over 4 hours from now, I'll have my Kingsman review up. Make sure you come back for that. I got some other videos going up today as well. Make sure you come back and join me. So that'll do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name is John Campea, and until next time, bye-bye.